I was concerned but happy for my daughter, and suddenly I got a call from her. She was crying and she said, "He is not here. He's gone. He took all the money." I was shocked and did not know how to react to this. Before we begin today's story, I have a request to our viewers to please subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and comment from which country you are listening to us. My name is Patricia Hayes. I'm 57 years old and I'm speaking to you from my home in Chicago, Illinois. I am a clinical psychologist. I have spent my entire career, 32 years, studying human behavior, understanding the complexities of the human mind, learning how people think and why they make the decisions they make. I have written 3 books on the subject of deception and manipulation. I have lectured at universities, I have consulted with law enforcement agencies, I have spent my professional life understanding how people lie and why they lie. And I thought I knew about deception. I thought I understood manipulation. I thought I could spot a liar from a mile away. I thought that my years of training and my professional expertise meant that I would be immune to the kinds of deception that destroy ordinary people. I was profoundly, dangerously wrong. Before I tell you what happened, I need to take you back. I need to show you the family that I had built, the children I had raised with care and intention, and the man who infiltrated our lives with the sole purpose of destroying us. I need to help you understand how someone like me, someone educated, trained, experienced, could miss the warning signs until it was almost too late. I grew up in Washington, D.C., the daughter of a pastor and a teacher. My father, Reverend Thomas Pierce, was a deeply spiritual man who believed that God loved all people, that kindness was a choice, and that the world was fundamentally good. My mother, Eleanor Pierce, was a teacher. She had a deep belief in education and in the power of knowledge to transform lives. Together, they created a home that was filled with warmth and faith and an underlying belief that people were inherently good. They taught me to see the good in everyone, to believe that most people have kind hearts, to trust in humanity. They taught me that the world, while sometimes difficult, was fundamentally a safe place where people could be trusted. My father was a pastor at a large church in the Capitol Hill area. He was beloved by his congregation. People would come to him for counseling, for guidance, for spiritual support. And my father would welcome them with open arms. He would listen without judgment. He would believe their stories. He would offer forgiveness and compassion to everyone who came to him, regardless of what they had done. My mother taught high school English. She had students who came from difficult backgrounds, poverty, abuse, neglect. She believed in every single one of them. She spent her own money on books for students who couldn't afford them. She stayed late after school to tutor students who were struggling. She believed that education could save lives. They were beautiful people, but I think, looking back now with the perspective of an adult, they were also naive. They believed the best about people because they themselves were good people, and they raised me to believe the same thing. I grew up in a house filled with music and books and dinner table conversations about philosophy and ethics and the nature of goodness. I grew up believing that if I was kind to people, they would be kind back. I grew up believing that honesty and vulnerability were virtues. I grew up believing that the world rewarded people who trusted. It took me many years and many painful experiences to learn that the world is more complicated than that. I went to college at Howard University, where I was surrounded by brilliant Black students who were going to change the world. I studied psychology because I wanted to understand people. I wanted to help them. I wanted to make a difference in the world by helping others understand themselves and their own minds. I went to graduate school at the University of Chicago, and I specialized in behavioral psychology and the study of deception. I became fascinated by the question of why people lie. What makes someone willing to betray another person's trust? What psychological mechanisms allow someone to look another person in the eye and lie to them repeatedly? How does someone become someone who can hurt others without feeling guilt or remorse? These questions consumed me. I read everything I could about the psychology of deception. I studied case after case of people who had committed fraud, who had manipulated others, who had destroyed lives through their lies. I published papers. I built a clinical practice where I worked with both perpetrators and victims of deception. And I thought I understood the subject deeply. I was so wrong. I met James Hayes when I was 32 years old. He was teaching a seminar on economics and human behavior at Northwestern University, where I was consulting on a research project. He was brilliant in a way that made him interesting to talk to. He was confident without being arrogant. He was kind without being weak. James came from a completely different background than I did. His parents were both successful entrepreneurs. They had built a business together and had become wealthy in the process. But unlike many wealthy people, they had used their money to help others. They had funded scholarships, they had supported charities, they had taught their son that wealth was a responsibility, not just a privilege. James had used his parents' wealth and his own intelligence to build a successful academic career. He was a tenured professor, he was published in top journals, he was respected by his peers, but he was also someone who genuinely cared about understanding how the world worked and about making it better. When we met, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt recognized. I felt seen, like this was a person who understood me in a way that few people ever had. We started dating. We would go to museums together and spend hours looking at paintings and discussing what the artists meant by their choices. We would go to concerts. We would cook together, trying recipes from different countries, talking about our lives and our dreams and our fears. After 2 years of dating, James proposed to me on a snowy evening in January. We were walking along the Chicago River, and he stopped me and got down on one knee. It was romantic and it was perfect, and I said yes without any hesitation. We married a year later in a ceremony at my father's church. It was small and intimate, just family and close friends. My father officiated. My mother cried happy tears. James and I made promises to each other that we meant with every fiber of our being. We bought a beautiful house in a good neighborhood on the North Shore of Chicago. It was a Victorian home that needed work, but that was part of its charm. James and I spent the first year of our marriage renovating it. We painted walls in colors that made us happy. We refinished the hardwood floors. We filled it with books and art and music. We created a home that reflected both of our personalities, James' love of order and structure, and mine of creativity and warmth. For the first 5 years of our marriage, we were deeply happy. We talked about having children. We dreamed about what kind of parents we would be. We discussed values and what was important to us. We wanted to raise children who were kind and thoughtful and intelligent. We wanted to raise children who understood their responsibility to the world around them. James wanted to have lots of children. He imagined a loud, chaotic, joyful household full of noise and laughter and activity. He imagined sitting around a dinner table with multiple children, all of them talking at once, all of them engaged and present and connected to each other. I was more cautious. I had seen so many families in my practice who were struggling with the demands of parenting. I had seen the toll it took on marriages. I wanted to have 1 or 2 children. I wanted to be able to give them my full attention. I wanted them to know without any doubt that they were loved unconditionally by their parents. We compromised. We decided to have 2 children and see how we felt after that. And then, in 2002, our son was born. Our son, Marcus Hayes, was born in November of 2002. He was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. He had his father's dark eyes and his father's serious expression. He had a way of looking at the world like he was trying to understand it, like every experience was a puzzle he was trying to solve. He would reach for things, he would make sounds that seemed like attempts at communication long before he actually learned to talk. When Marcus was 2 years old, our daughter was born. Her name was Simone Hayes, and she was completely different from her brother in almost every way. Where Marcus was introspective and careful, Simone was spontaneous and open-hearted. She came into the world crying loudly, and from that moment on, she seemed determined to experience everything life had to offer. She was beautiful on the outside, but more importantly, she was beautiful on the inside. As they grew, I watched them become more and more themselves. I watched them develop their own personalities, their own values, their own dreams for their lives, and I was so proud of both of them. Fast forward to 2022. Marcus was 20 years old and Simone was 18 years old. James and I were both still working, though we had become more selective about our cases and our teaching loads. We had reached a point in our careers where we could be choosier about what we took on and what we said no to. We had built a successful life. We had financial security. We had a marriage that had only grown stronger over time. Our children had grown into successful adults. Well, relatively speaking. They were still young, still figuring out their paths in the world, but they were thoughtful and kind and intelligent, and we believed that they would go on to do great things. Marcus was in his junior year at Northwestern University, where his father taught. He was studying economics and business, and he had already shown remarkable aptitude for analysis and strategic thinking. He had completed an internship at a prestigious investment firm, and they had offered him a full-time position after graduation. He was focused and driven, and he had a real gift for understanding market trends and making smart investment decisions. Marcus lived on campus during the school year, but he came home for holidays and for long weekends. His colleagues at the investment firm respected him. His professors had already begun talking about him moving into a leadership role. He was dating seriously a woman named David Chen, who was equally successful and equally ambitious. She was in law school, and she was already excelling in her classes. Simone was different. She was a beautiful and intelligent young woman, but she had chosen a different path than many of her peers. While her friends were going to prestigious universities and planning high-powered careers, Simone had decided to take a gap year. She said that she wanted to figure out what she actually wanted to do before investing time and money in a college degree. "I don't want to spend 4 years studying something I'm not passionate about," she had told me. "I want to take some time to explore, to work, to figure out who I am." James and I had supported her decision. We believed that our children should do what made them happy, not what they thought they were supposed to do. We believed that sometimes the conventional path was not the best path. During her gap year, Simone had taken a job as a project manager for a local nonprofit that provided housing and support services to homeless individuals. It was meaningful work. She was helping people, and she seemed to find deep fulfillment in it. But then, when she was 20 years old, Simone had decided to step back from her job. She said that she wanted to focus on managing our household. She wanted to be present. She wanted to create a home that was warm and welcoming. She wanted to cook and clean and do the kind of work that allowed her to think creatively and move at her own pace. James and I had been surprised by this decision. We had raised Simone to believe that she could be anything she wanted to be. We had encouraged her to have ambitions and to pursue them. But we also believed that our children should make their own choices about their lives. "If this makes you happy, then I support you," I had told her. And for a while, it did seem to make her happy. She threw herself into managing our household. She reorganized the pantry. She created a beautiful garden in our backyard. She started cooking elaborate meals. She seemed content and fulfilled. "I think it's wonderful," James had said to me. "She's making a choice that works for her. Not everyone needs to have a high-powered career. Some people find fulfillment in other ways." I agreed with him. I had been wrong before about what I thought my daughter should do with her life. I didn't want to make that mistake again. So I supported her decision, and I waited to see where her life would take her. Simone brought David home for dinner one Saturday night in the spring of 2023. She was 21 years old. She had been dating David for about 3 months, though she had kept it quiet. She hadn't mentioned him much to James or to me. We knew she was seeing someone, but the details were scarce. But on this Saturday night, she seemed excited in a way that was almost electric. She was nervous in a way that I had rarely seen her nervous. She was anticipating something. She was hopeful. "Mom, Dad, I want you to meet someone really important to me," she said as she opened the door and let David walk into our living room. I will never forget my first impression of David Chen, because in many ways that first impression told me everything I needed to know. But I was trained to see deception, and yet I didn't see it. Or maybe I did see it and I didn't want to believe it. David was handsome in a conventional way. He was tall, about 6'1". He was wearing slacks and a button-down shirt that looked expensive but not ostentatious. He had a watch that was classic and understated. His shoes were polished. His hair was perfectly styled. He had warm brown eyes and an easy smile. He moved through our home like someone who was comfortable in his own skin, like someone who belonged in any space he found himself in. This is a particular kind of confidence that is often associated with privilege or with careful study of how privileged people behave. He shook James's hand firmly. The handshake was warm and genuine-seeming, but also brief, long enough to be polite, but not so long as to be unusual or intense. He embraced me in a way that was appropriate, but also familiar. He did not hug me like a stranger would hug a stranger. He hugged me like someone who had been hugged by many people's mothers and knew exactly how to perform this particular greeting. "Dr. and Professor Hayes, it's such an honor to meet you both. Simone has told me so much about you. I've been looking forward to this evening all week." He complimented our home with specific details. He mentioned the architectural style of the house. He commented on a painting on the wall, a piece of African American art that we had collected years ago. He asked intelligent questions about how we decorated. He asked about the neighborhood and how long we had lived there. He was charming. He was warm. He was engaging. He was everything a young man should be when he meets his girlfriend's parents for the first time. But, and I say this as someone whose entire career has been built on reading people, on understanding human behavior, on recognizing the subtle tells that indicate when someone is not being authentic, there was something off about David. There was something that didn't quite add up. It was subtle. It was the kind of thing that would be easy to dismiss if you weren't paying close attention. It was the way his eyes moved when he thought no one was looking at him. It was a particular quality to his attention that seemed calculated rather than spontaneous. It was the way he seemed to be assessing everything and everyone in the room, like he was taking inventory of what he found. During dinner, I watched him carefully. I studied his interactions with James, with Simone, with me. I listened to the way he talked. I paid attention to the questions he asked and the way he asked them. And I noticed something that made my internal alarm bells start ringing, though I couldn't articulate it at the time. When James started talking about his work, about the economics research he was conducting, David leaned in slightly. His body language changed. His attention intensified. He asked follow-up questions that showed not just surface-level interest, but genuine curiosity about the specifics of James's research and James's expertise. But then, when Simone started talking about her nonprofit work, about the people she had been helping, about the challenges of providing services to homeless populations, David's attention shifted. He listened, but with less intensity. His eyes seemed to drift slightly. He asked a polite follow-up question, but it didn't have the same depth of interest that he had shown when talking to James. It was almost imperceptible. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. But I was trained to notice these kinds of subtle shifts in attention and focus. I had been trained to understand what they meant. And what this shift suggested to me was that David Chen was more interested in James, in James's intelligence, in James's expertise, in his professional accomplishments, than he was in Simone, his girlfriend. This was a red flag. It was a subtle one, but it was definitely there. Later, when we were discussing the meal after David and Simone had left, I tried to articulate this to James. "He seems like a good man," James said. "He was charming, he was respectful, he asked good questions. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know us." "I know," I said carefully, trying to find the words for what I had observed, "but I'm not sure about something. I'm not sure that his interest is organic. I think he's being very intentional about how he's presenting himself." "What do you mean?" James asked. He was not defensive, but he was genuinely confused by what I was suggesting. "I mean that I think he's studied what the right way to behave is, and he's performing that behavior. I don't think it's coming naturally. It feels rehearsed." "You're being paranoid," James said gently. "He was charming, he was respectful. That's what people do when they meet their girlfriend's parents. They try to make a good impression." "I know that, but this feels like more than that. This feels like he's calculated exactly what he needs to do to make a good impression." I started to pay more attention to the money conversations. I noticed that David had a way of steering conversations in that direction. He would ask James about his work, and then he would ask follow-up questions that seemed to naturally lead toward discussions of wealth and finances. He would comment on the neighborhood, and then ask how long we had lived there, and whether we had seen an appreciation in property value. He would comment on a piece of art in our home, and then ask where we had acquired it, and whether we had invested in art as a way to diversify our portfolio. It was like watching a chess player make moves that seemed casual, but were actually part of a larger strategic plan. I mentioned this to James multiple times. "He's interested in economics," James said one evening. "It makes sense that he would want to know about our financial situation. That's part of his field of interest." "But he's not asking about economics in the abstract," I said. "He's asking about us specifically. He's asking about our property, our investments, our financial situation." "He's getting to know us," James said. "That's normal. When you meet someone's family, you want to understand their background, including their financial situation." "I know," I said, "but something about the way he's asking feels wrong. It feels like he's taking an inventory, like he's assessing the value of what we have, like he's calculating something." "You're hyper-vigilant," James said, and he said it with kindness, but also with a note of dismissal. "You study deception so much that you see deception in everyone. You need to give this young man a chance. He seems like a good person." "I'm not saying he's not a good person," I said carefully. "I'm saying that something about his interest in our finances feels strange." But James was not convinced, and I didn't push the issue. I told myself that I was being paranoid. I told myself that my years of studying human manipulation had made me suspicious of a young man who was simply trying to understand his girlfriend's family. I told myself that I needed to be more trusting. Or maybe I knew, on some level, that I was right, but I didn't want to be right. Because if David was someone who was interested in our money, that meant that my daughter was dating a predator, and I wasn't ready to face that possibility yet. So I said nothing, and I watched, and I waited. 8 months after Simone first brought David home, he proposed. She called me, crying with joy, and told me that David had gotten down on one knee in front of Lake Michigan. He had taken her to their favorite restaurant. He had taken her for a walk along the shore. As the sun was setting, he had proposed. It was romantic. It was perfect. It was exactly the kind of proposal that a young woman dreams about. And Simone said yes without any hesitation. "That's wonderful," I said, and I meant it. I really did. Because despite my reservations about David, I loved my daughter and I wanted her to be happy. I wanted to believe that I had been wrong about him. I wanted to believe that he was the good man that he appeared to be on the surface. But then Simone told me something that made my stomach drop. And Mom, there's something else I need to tell you. David and I got married at City Hall yesterday. We wanted to do it before the big wedding. We didn't want to wait. We wanted to be officially married first. I felt like I had been hit. You got married? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to be the calm, rational mother that she needed me to be in that moment. Simone, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you want us there? David said it would be more meaningful if it was just the two of us. He said he wanted our marriage to start with something that was just ours, something private and intimate that we didn't share with anyone else. And I think he's right. I think it's beautiful that way. I didn't think it was beautiful. I thought it was a red flag the size of Texas, but I didn't say that to my daughter. I said, "Sweetheart, I'm happy for you. I really am. But you should have told us. We should have been part of this moment." "I wanted to," she said, "but David was pretty clear that he wanted it to be private, and I respected that. It's important to him that we have things that are just ours, that we're not constantly sharing with our families." This made sense on the surface. It's not uncommon for couples to want some privacy, some space that is theirs alone, but in the context of everything else I had observed, it took on a different meaning. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself to observe more before I jumped to conclusions. And then Simone asked when he wanted to move out. "I assume you two want to get your own place," I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "I assume you two want to get your own place." "Yes, actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. David and I want to start our own place. We want to have our own home and start our lives together. And we were wondering if you and Dad might be able to help us with that, maybe as a wedding gift." "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "Maybe $50,000. David says it would be enough to get an apartment deposit and some furniture, and he could use it to start his own business. We promise we'll pay you back within a year, or even faster once David's business gets going." I felt my alarm bells ringing even louder. This was too much, too fast. The proposal, the secret marriage, the immediate request for money, it was all moving at a speed that was not normal or healthy. I told her I would talk to James about it. When I did, James's reaction was immediate and positive. "Of course we should help them," he said. "They're starting their lives together. We have the money. This is what parents do." "James, I don't think this is a good idea," I said. "I don't think he can be trusted." "You don't know that," James said. "You barely know him." "I know enough," I said. "I know that he's moved very fast with our daughter. I know that he got married to her without telling us. I know that he's asking for a large sum of money very quickly. I know that he seems to be more interested in our finances than in Simone as a person." "You're being unfair," James said. "You're making judgments about a man based on nothing but your suspicions. He's been nothing but kind to us. He's been respectful to Simone. He's asked us for help starting a life, which is what young couples do." "James, please just listen to me," I said. "Something about this doesn't feel right. I have studied deception and manipulation for 30 years. I have built my career on understanding how people lie, and my instincts are telling me that something is very wrong with this man." "Your instincts could be wrong," James said gently. "You need to let go of this and be happy for your daughter." We argued about it. We went back and forth. James believed that I was being paranoid and unfair. I believed that I was seeing something that James wasn't able to see. In the end, James's perspective won. He was her father. He wanted to help his daughter start her life. He wanted to support her marriage. We gave Simone $50,000. We told her to use it wisely. We told her to be careful with it. We told her to make sure they built something solid over the next year. We told her that this money was meant to help them become independent, not to make them dependent on us.
We told her that if they managed this money well, if they used it to build a foundation for their lives, then we would be proud of them. If we knew what was coming, we would have saved that money and kept Simone away from David Chen entirely. It was the second morning of Simone and David's marriage. They had spent their first night together in the apartment that they had rented with the money we had given them. The apartment was in a nice area, not far from where we lived. It was a one-bedroom, one-bath unit in a modern building with good amenities. Simone woke up that morning feeling happy, feeling hopeful, feeling like she was beginning a new chapter of her life with the man she loved. She reached over to touch David, to wake him up, to start their day together. But David wasn't there. She checked the bed, she checked the bathroom, she checked the kitchen, she checked every room in the apartment. There was no sign of him. His clothes were gone, his toiletries were gone, his passport was gone, anything of value that he had in that apartment was gone. The $50,000 that we had given them, the money that was supposed to help them build a life together, was also gone. Simone later told me that in that moment she felt something break inside her. She said that she knew, even before she understood all the details, exactly what had happened. She said that some part of her knew that something was wrong with David all along. She said that she had ignored her own instincts because she wanted to believe in him so badly. She called us first. "Mom, I can't find David. He's gone. His stuff is gone. The money is gone." I felt a cold sense of certainty settle over me. I had known, somehow, that this would happen. I had known from the first time I saw David Chen walk into our living room that he was not what he appeared to be. "Did you call the police?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to be the calm, rational mother that she needed me to be in that moment. "Not yet. I called you first." "Call them now, Simone. Tell them what happened. Then call your father. We'll be there as soon as we can."
She called the police. The police came to the apartment. The officers took a report. They asked her questions. When did she last see him? Had he seemed upset? Did they have any marital problems? Had he mentioned anything about leaving? No, 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 no. He had seemed happy. He had seemed excited about their new life together. He had seemed like everything was perfect. They had made love, they had fallen asleep together, and then, when she woke up, he was gone. The police explained that there wasn't much they could do. They explained that technically David had a right to take his belongings and leave. They explained that unless there was evidence of fraud, unless he had explicitly stolen money or valuables that belonged to Simone, not to both of them, this was a civil matter, not a criminal matter. But then Simone opened the safe. Not just the bedroom safe, but another safe that David had insisted they put in the apartment. He had said it was important to have a secure place to keep their valuables. Simone had agreed. She had put her grandmother's jewelry in that safe. She had put pieces of jewelry that I had given her over the years in that safe. She had put documents and other items of value in that safe. It was completely empty. Every piece of jewelry, every item of value, all of it was gone. Now it was fraud. Now it was theft. The police took that more seriously. Over the next few weeks, as we worked with the police, as we tried to understand what had happened to our daughter, we discovered some disturbing things about David Chen. First, his name wasn't David Chen. He had been using a fake identity the entire time he was with Simone. His real name was Marcus Thompson. He had created the identity of David Chen for the specific purpose of meeting and seducing our daughter. Second, he had done this before, many times. According to the detective who was working on our case, a man matching his description had been involved in similar frauds in at least 5 other states. There were at least 20 known victims, women in different states, all with similar stories. They had met him, they had fallen in love with him, he had married them quickly, he had asked for access to their money or for large gifts of money, and then he had disappeared with everything. The total amount of money he had stolen was staggering, nearly $2 million from 20 different women over a period of 5 years.
The detective showed us photographs of him with different women. In each photograph, he had changed his appearance: different hair color, different facial hair, different clothing style, different posture. But looking at the photographs, I could see that it was the same man. The eyes were the same, the expression was the same, the way he held his body was similar. "How has he not been caught?" I asked the detective, whose name was Detective Michael Rodriguez. He was a patient man with kind eyes, who had clearly seen a lot of crime and suffering in his career. "How is he still doing this? Why haven't the police departments in different states coordinated to catch him?" "Because he's smart," he asked. "He changes his appearance, he changes his name, he moves frequently. By the time one victim realizes what's happened and files a report, he's already moved on to the next one. He's in a different state, he might have a different identity. The police departments in different states don't always communicate effectively. It takes time to build a case that would hold up in court. So he's just going to keep doing this? He's just going to keep victimizing women? How many more lives is he going to destroy?" "Possibly," he said, "unless we catch him. But that's going to require a sustained investigation. We're not equipped to do that with just local resources. We would need to coordinate with federal law enforcement, which takes time and resources that we don't always have." I listened to Detective Rodriguez explain the limitations of law enforcement. I listened to him explain why Marcus Thompson, also known as David Chen, also known as Robert Harrison, also known by at least a dozen other names, had managed to evade justice for so long. And I made a decision that would change the course of not just my daughter's life, but the lives of multiple women across the country. I decided that I was going to catch him myself. That night, I sat in our living room with James. Simone was in the guest room, sleeping heavily from the emotional exhaustion of the day. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. "I'm going to catch him," I said to James. "I'm going to do whatever it takes to find Marcus Thompson, and I'm going to catch him." James looked at me like I had lost my mind. "You're a psychologist, not a detective," he said. "This is what law enforcement is supposed to do." "And how long is that going to take?" I said. "How many more women is he going to defraud in the meantime? How many more lives is he going to destroy?" "Patricia, this is dangerous," he said. "This man is a predator. If he realizes you're trying to catch him, he could hurt you." "I know, but I can't sit around and do nothing. I won't. He hurt our daughter. He stole from us. He's hurt 20 other women, and the only way he's going to be caught is if someone does something." James was quiet for a long time. "What are you thinking?" he finally asked. "I'm thinking that I understand how this man thinks. I've studied his kind for years. I've spent my career understanding predators and con artists, and I think I might be able to use that understanding to catch him." "How?" James asked. "I'll figure it out," I said, "but I need you to support me in this." James was not happy, but he is a man who knows when his wife has made a decision and there's nothing he can do to change her mind. He is a man who recognizes the particular kind of determination that comes from a mother's need to protect her child and avenge a violation. "I'll support you," he said finally, "but we do this carefully, and we work with the police. We don't do anything illegal or reckless." I agreed, and I called Detective Rodriguez. I told Detective Rodriguez what I was planning. "I'm going to create a fake identity," I said. "I'm going to pose as a wealthy woman looking for a husband, and I'm going to bait him. If he's done this before, if this is his pattern, then he won't be able to resist the lure of a wealthy woman who is looking to get married. He'll respond, and when he does, you'll be waiting." The detective was skeptical at first. He thought I was taking unnecessary risks. He thought I was overestimating my ability to handle a dangerous situation. He had seen too much crime, seen too many people hurt by their own overconfidence. But then I explained my reasoning. I explained that I studied people like Marcus Thompson for 30 years. I explained that I understood his psychology. I explained that I was not going to confront him alone, that the police would be present, that every step of this operation would be carefully controlled. "If you're going to do this," Detective Rodriguez said, "we're going to do it right. We're going to make sure you're safe, and we're going to make sure that when we catch him, everything we do is by the book so that it holds up in court." I agreed, and we began to plan. Over the next 2 weeks, I transformed myself into someone I had never been before. I cut my hair, I dyed it from its natural dark brown to a lighter shade that I had never worn before. I changed the way I dressed. Gone were the academic blazers and simple slacks that I wore to my office. Instead, I bought expensive but understated clothing, designer jeans, silk blouses, cashmere sweaters. I changed the way I carried myself. I practiced walking differently, holding myself with a different kind of confidence, the confidence that comes from old money, from privilege, from never having to worry about anything. I studied the photographs of wealthy women in magazines. I analyzed the way they did their hair, the way they wore their makeup, the way they accessorized. I went to a salon and had my hair professionally colored and styled. I bought jewelry, not the real expensive jewelry, but jewelry that looked expensive. I had manicures. I bought new glasses frames that made me look younger and more fashionable. The transformation was not just physical, it was psychological. I created an entire backstory for Catherine Monroe. I understood her motivations. I understood her personality. I understood what she wanted and why she wanted it. Catherine Monroe was a woman in her mid-50s who had inherited money from a wealthy family. She had been married once, but her husband had passed away 5 years ago. She had invested her inheritance wisely and had built a comfortable life for herself. She had traveled extensively. She had art and antiques. She had a sophisticated palate. She was looking for a man who understood the value of partnership and who was interested in building a life of meaning with a woman who could provide financial security. Catherine Monroe was lonely, but she was also discerning. She wasn't going to marry just anyone. She was looking for a man who was intelligent, who was kind, who had his own ambitions, but who was also willing to be a partner. She was willing to pay for that partnership. I rented an apartment in a different part of the city. It was an upscale apartment in a building with good security. I furnished it with expensive but tasteful furniture. I decorated the walls with prints from galleries. I filled the bookshelves with books that Catherine Monroe would read. I stocked the kitchen with expensive wines and specialty foods. I created social media profiles under the name Catherine Monroe. I made sure that the profiles were convincing. I posted photographs of expensive vacations. I posted about gallery openings I had attended. I posted about books I was reading and restaurants I had visited. I made it clear that I was a woman of means and sophistication. And then I started creating the narrative that I was looking to get married. I created a profile on multiple dating websites. The profile made it clear that I was a woman of means who was looking for a serious relationship that could lead to marriage. I mentioned that I was willing to support a partner who was starting his own business. I mentioned that I valued intelligence and kindness above. I posted photographs that showed me as an attractive, put-together woman who clearly had financial resources. In the photographs, I was wearing designer clothing. I was photographed in upscale settings. I looked like exactly what a con artist would be looking for, a wealthy woman with financial resources and, presumably, emotional vulnerabilities that could be exploited. The applications started coming in almost immediately. Dozens of men, hundreds of men, men from all over the country who saw the promise of wealth and wanted a piece of it. Some of the applications were crude and obvious. Some were more sophisticated. But all of them shared one thing in common. They were interested in the money, not in Catherine Monroe as a person. I went through them carefully. With Detective Rodriguez, I read each letter. I looked at each photograph. I studied handwriting. I analyzed the way men wrote about themselves. Most of them were not Marcus Thompson. Some were obvious con artists who were not hiding their intentions at all. Some seemed to be genuinely lonely men looking for connection. Some seemed predatory in different ways, looking for women to exploit for reasons other than money. But I was looking for a specific kind of predator. I was looking for someone who had demonstrated a particular pattern of behavior. I was looking for Marcus Thompson. 3 weeks into this operation, I received a letter that made my blood run cold. It was brief. It was charming. It was exactly the right combination of humble and confident. "Dear Catherine," it began, My name is Robert Harrison. I'm a successful businessman looking for a woman who understands the value of partnership and mutual support. I believe in building something real with someone special. If you're interested in meeting, I would love to hear from you." It was the handwriting that made me certain. It was the way certain letters were formed. It was the particular slant of the writing. I had studied enough of Marcus Thompson's handwriting samples, from documents related to his fraud, from letters he had written to other victims, that I could recognize it now. And it was the eyes in the photograph. The man had changed his appearance significantly. Different haircut, different facial hair, different everything. But the eyes were the same, those calculating, predatory eyes that I had seen in our living room so many months ago. Those eyes that had been looking at my daughter with fake love, while he was actually calculating how much money he could take from her. This was him. This was Marcus Thompson, also known as David Chen, also known by a dozen other names. This was the man who had defrauded my daughter and destroyed our family. I called Detective Rodriguez immediately. "I found him," I said. "The letter is here. It's his handwriting. It's his eyes. It's him." I could hear the shift in Detective Rodriguez's voice when he realized that my plan had worked. I could hear the change from skepticism to urgency. "Okay," he said. "Now we move forward carefully. We respond to the letter, we set up a meeting, and we catch him." I responded to his letter immediately as Catherine Monroe. "Dear Robert," I wrote, "your letter touched my heart. I'm looking for someone who understands that real connection is about partnership and mutual growth. I would very much like to meet you. I'm available this weekend if you would like to come to my apartment for dinner. I look forward to getting to know you better. Sincerely, Catherine." He responded within hours. "Catherine, I would be delighted to meet you. Saturday evening at 7 p.m. would be perfect. I'm very much looking forward to this. I have a feeling that this could be the beginning of something wonderful." Over the course of the next week, we exchanged emails. I, as Catherine Monroe, was warm and engaging and interested in getting to know him. I asked him questions about his business. I asked him about his background. I asked him about his dreams and his aspirations. He responded with a carefully crafted persona. He told me about his business ventures, vague descriptions that were designed to sound impressive without committing to specific details that could be verified or contradicted. He told me about his childhood, a story that was designed to make him seem sympathetic and understandable. He told me about his desire to find a partner who understood him and who could support his ambitions. Everything was a lie, but it was a beautiful lie. It was a lie told with the confidence of someone who had told it many times before and had perfected the art of making it believable. I knew it was a lie, but I had to pretend to believe it. I had to respond as Catherine Monroe would respond, with warmth and interest, and the kind of vulnerability that comes from a woman who is lonely and hoping that this man might be her person. Detective Rodriguez and I coordinated everything carefully. The apartment where Catherine Monroe lived was actually an apartment that the Chicago Police Department had access to. It was wired for sound and video recording. There were cameras positioned in the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. There were microphones in multiple rooms. Everything that happened in that apartment would be recorded. Officers would be positioned throughout the apartment building. There would be officers in a van outside the building. There would be officers positioned in the hallway outside the apartment. When I gave the signal, a specific phrase that I would work into conversation, the officers would move in. Detective Rodriguez was concerned about my safety. He spent hours going over the plan with me. He talked about what could go wrong. He talked about how to handle different scenarios. He talked about the fact that Marcus Thompson was a predator who had no compunction about lying or manipulating or potentially hurting people who got in his way. "I know you're a trained psychologist," Detective Rodriguez said. "I know you've studied this stuff for years, but this man is different. He's not just a regular criminal. He's someone who can look another person in the eye and lie convincingly. He's someone who has built an entire life around deception. He's not going to be happy when he realizes he's been caught. He might become violent." "I understand," I said, "but I also understand how he thinks. I understand his psychology. I understand what makes him tick, and I'm going to be careful. The moment anything feels wrong or dangerous, I'm going to get out. You'll handle the rest."
Just be smart, Detective Rodriguez said. The moment anything feels off, you signal us. You don't take any risks. Your safety is more important than catching this guy. But I didn't believe that. I believed that catching Marcus Thompson was the most important thing in the world. I believed that stopping him from hurting any more women was worth any risk to myself. On Saturday evening, I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was not Patricia Hayes, clinical psychologist. The woman looking back at me was Catherine Monroe, a wealthy widow looking for love. I wore a black dress that was elegant but not too formal. I wore jewelry that looked expensive. I styled my hair carefully. I applied makeup that made me look a few years younger than I was. I looked like a woman who had money and who was open to the possibility of love. I looked like the perfect prey for a con artist. I looked like the perfect bait. Detective Rodriguez was on the phone in my ear, connected through a wire that I was wearing under my dress. "We're in position," he said. "All units are in place. You're safe. We're with you." I took a deep breath. I tried to calm the adrenaline that was coursing through my body. "I'm ready," I said. He arrived at 7 p.m. exactly. Prompt, respectful, perfect. I barely recognized him. He had changed his appearance so dramatically that if I hadn't seen the eyes, if I hadn't studied the features so carefully over the past weeks, I might not have known for certain that it was him. He looked younger somehow, fresher, like a predator who had successfully completed one hunt and was already looking for the next one. He was wearing an expensive suit that fit him perfectly. He had cologne on that smelled like money. His hair was styled carefully. He looked like exactly what Catherine Monroe would be attracted to: successful, put together, confident. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw the emptiness. I saw the void where a conscience should be. I saw the calculation and the cold assessment of me as a potential mark. "You know," he said after we had been talking for about an hour, "I feel a real connection with you, Catherine. I know it's early, but I feel like there's something special between us, something that could lead to something real." "I feel it too," I said, and I meant it in a way he could never understand. I felt a very real connection. It was the connection between a hunter and her prey. "I would like to see you again, regularly. I think we could have something beautiful together. I think you're the kind of woman I've been looking for, someone who understands me, someone who can support my ambitions, someone who can be a real partner." "I would like that," I said. "But let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." "Of course," he said.
This was the moment. This was the moment when I transitioned from Catherine Monroe back to Patricia Hayes. This was the moment when I revealed the trap. "What would you do if I told you that I didn't actually have any money?" I said, watching his face carefully. "What would you do if I told you that my entire life, my wealth, my success, my whole persona was a fiction created specifically to catch you?" For a moment, his face went blank. For a moment, I saw him processing what I had just said. His brain was trying to understand what was happening. His mind was trying to recalibrate the situation. He had been so confident in his ability to manipulate me, so certain that he had identified a vulnerable, wealthy mark, that it took him a moment to realize that he had actually walked into a trap. And then his expression changed. He understood. He knew. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm Patricia Hayes. I'm Simone Hayes's mother. I'm the woman whose family you defrauded. I'm the woman who has spent the last month hunting you." I saw something flash across his face, a moment of real fear. He realized that the game was over. He realized that he had been caught. He stood up from the table. His hand moved toward his jacket, and for a moment I thought that he might be reaching for a weapon. I thought that he might be about to become violent. But then the police burst through the door. "Don't move," Detective Rodriguez shouted. "Hands where we can see them, now." Marcus Thompson, David Chen, Robert Harrison, whatever name he was using, put his hands up. He was arrested without a struggle. As the officers were cuffing him, he looked at me with an expression of pure hatred. He looked at me like I had done something unforgivable. He looked at me like he couldn't believe that a woman, a middle-aged academic woman, had outsmarted him. I looked back at him with no emotion on my face. I had caught him, that was all that mattered. In the interrogation room, Marcus Thompson sat across from Detective Rodriguez and me. We sat on one side of the table, he sat on the other side, handcuffed, realizing that his entire world had just fallen apart. Detective Rodriguez read him his rights. Marcus Thompson said that he wanted to speak to a lawyer. But then, after a few minutes of silence, he changed his mind. He said, "I want to talk. I'll tell you everything." Detective Rodriguez and I looked at each other. We hadn't expected this. We had expected him to ask for a lawyer and refuse to cooperate. But sometimes predators like Marcus Thompson have a particular kind of pride. They want to brag about what they've done. They want people to understand how smart they are, how clever they've been, how long they've managed to evade justice. "All right," Detective Rodriguez said. "Tell us." And Marcus Thompson, with the casual indifference of someone discussing the weather, confessed to his crimes. He confessed to the fraud against Simone. He confessed to fraud against 23 other women, not the 20 that the police had initially counted. He confessed to stealing a total of $2.1 million over a 5-year period. He explained his methodology in detail, with a kind of pride in his voice. He said that he targeted successful, intelligent women who were looking for love. He said that he would create a persona, a successful businessman, an entrepreneur, someone who seemed stable and grounded, but also ambitious and driven. He said that he would romance them carefully and deliberately. He would move quickly into serious relationships. He would create a sense of urgency around getting married. The key, he said, with a kind of pride in his voice, is to move fast. If you move slowly, they start to figure you out. But if you move fast, if you create this sense of excitement and urgency and romance, they don't have time to think clearly. They're too caught up in the emotions. He explained how he would propose after a short period of time. He would suggest getting married at City Hall or in a small private ceremony. He would explain that he wanted it to be private, that he wanted their marriage to be special and just theirs. Once they're married to you, he said, they feel like they've committed to you. They feel like there's an obligation to help you. And that's when you ask for money. You frame it as something you need for your business or something you need to help them build a life together. And they give it to you because they're invested in making the marriage work. And then, Detective Rodriguez asked, and then you take the money and you disappear. You change your appearance, you change your name, you move to a different state, and you start looking for your next victim. He said this with no indication of guilt or remorse. He said it like he was describing a business model, which, I suppose, to him it was. "How many women did you marry under false identities?" I asked. I lost count, at least 23 that I know the names of, but there were probably more. There were some that I didn't even bother with the whole marriage thing. I would just get close to them, get access to their financial information, and steal what I could. But the marriage thing worked better. Women are more likely to give you money if they think they're married to you. Did you ever feel any remorse? Did you ever think about the women you hurt? Did you ever consider the lives you destroyed? He looked at me with something that might have been confusion. "Why would I?" he asked. "They were just marks. They were targets. I didn't know them. I didn't care about them. I cared about their money. That was the only thing that mattered." This is when I truly understood the evil that I was dealing with. This was not a man who made a mistake. This was not a man who got caught up in circumstances beyond his control. This was a man who was fundamentally broken on a psychological level. This was a man who saw other human beings, specifically women, not as people deserving of respect and consideration, but objects to be exploited and discarded. How many lives did you ruin? How many women? I don't know. A lot. Do you know that one of them was my daughter? Your daughter was a mark like all the others. She was easy. She was vulnerable. She believed what I told her. She gave me the money. I took it. That's how the game works. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to make him feel a fraction of the pain that he had caused to so many women. I wanted to make him understand the destruction he had wrought. But I didn't do any of that.
Instead, I stood up and I walked out of the interrogation room. Detective Rodriguez took over the interview and continued to document Marcus Thompson's confession. The trial lasted 8 weeks. The prosecution brought case after case. They brought victim after victim to testify about what had happened to them. A woman from Arizona who had met Robert Johnson online and married him 6 months later, only to discover that he had stolen $100,000 from her before disappearing. A woman from Florida who had met David Miller at a coffee shop and dated him for 3 months before he suggested they get married, only to discover that he had drained her bank accounts and disappeared. One by one, these women came forward and told their stories. One by one, they described the seduction, the romance, the carefully orchestrated proposal, the quick marriage, the requests for money, and the devastating disappearance. I sat in the courtroom and I listened to each woman testify, and I saw in each of their faces the pain and betrayal and confusion that comes from realizing that someone you loved was not who you thought they were. I saw women who had been strong and intelligent and accomplished in their own right, reduced to tears by the memory of how they had been manipulated and hurt. The prosecution presented financial records. They showed the transfers of money from each victim to their husband. They showed the accounts that Marcus Thompson had used to hide and launder the stolen money. They showed the pattern of his predatory behavior, the same methods, the same con, repeated over and over again across multiple states and multiple identities. The defense tried to argue that the relationships were consensual, that the marriages were real, that the financial transfers were gifts made by women who were willing participants in the relationship. But the sheer volume of evidence, the sheer number of victims, the clear pattern of predatory behavior, the financial records, the aliases, the disguises, it was impossible to deny. The judge allowed the jury to see video of my confrontation with Marcus Thompson in the apartment. The jury watched as I, as Catherine Monroe, asked him the crucial question. The jury heard his confused response. The jury understood in that moment that this was a man who preyed on women for money and who felt no guilt about what he did. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Guilty of wire fraud. Guilty of identity fraud. Guilty of theft. Guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud. The count was so long that it took 10 minutes to read the verdict in its entirety. At the sentencing hearing, the judge had harsh words for Marcus Thompson. The judge described his crimes as particularly heinous and predatory in nature. The judge talked about the damage that Marcus Thompson had done to women across multiple states. The judge talked about the fact that Marcus Thompson had shown no remorse for his actions and felt no empathy for his victims. This court cannot undo the damage that you have done. We cannot restore the trust that these women have lost or the money that they have given you, but we can ensure that you do not have the opportunity to hurt anyone else.
30 years. By the time he was released, he would be in his 80s. He would likely never get out. His entire life, what remained of it, would be spent behind bars. When the sentence was announced, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief exactly, not closure, because I don't think closure is truly possible after something like this, but I felt a sense of completion. I felt like I had done what I set out to do. I had caught the man who had hurt my daughter. I had protected the women he might have hurt in the future. I looked back at Simone, who was sitting in the row behind me. She was crying, but they seemed like a different kind of tears than she had cried in the weeks after discovering that David was gone. These seemed like tears of release, like tears of a burden being lifted. In the weeks and months after Marcus Thompson's conviction, Simone struggled. She struggled with shame. She struggled with humiliation. She struggled with the fact that her poor judgment had not only affected her, but had contributed to the conviction of a predator who had hurt other women. But that's not your fault, I told her over and over again. You're not responsible for what he did. You're not responsible for his choices. "I know that intellectually," she said, "but I can't help feeling like I should have seen it. I can't help feeling like I should have known that something was wrong with him." He was good at being convincing, I told her. He had done it many times before. He knew exactly what to say and how to say it. "You're not stupid, sweetheart. You're human." And he deliberately targeted that humanity in you. Slowly, over time, Simone began to rebuild her sense of self-worth. She went to therapy. She talked to other women who had been victimized by Marcus Thompson. She realized that she was not alone in her experience, that what had happened to her was part of a larger pattern of predatory behavior. She never married again. She never pursued serious relationships, but she did begin to trust people again, in small ways. She began to believe that there were good people in the world, that not everyone was a predator in disguise. She eventually went back to work with the nonprofit. She said that she wanted to help other vulnerable people. She wanted to use her experience to make a difference in the world. She wanted to turn her pain into purpose. That is when I realized that my daughter had truly begun to heal. After Marcus Thompson was convicted, I did something that I had been planning to do for months. I reached out to the other women that he had victimized. I found them through the court documents. I sent them messages. I told them who I was. I told them what I had done. I told them that I wanted to help them heal and move forward. Most of them wanted nothing to do with me initially. They were angry. They were hurt. They didn't want to hear from anyone connected to the case. But slowly, some of them responded. Some of them agreed to meet with me. Some of them agreed to participate in a support group that I organized. Over the course of a year, I brought together 11 of the women who had been victimized by Marcus Thompson. We met regularly. We shared our stories. We supported each other. We helped each other process the trauma and the betrayal. One woman, a lawyer from New York named Patricia Anderson, became a close friend. She had been one of his earliest victims. She had lost $200,000 to him. She had spent years tracking him before the police finally caught him. "I'm grateful to you," she told me one day. "I know that sounds strange. I'm grateful to you for doing what you did, for catching him. But I'm also grateful for this group, for these women. I felt so alone in my experience. I felt like I was the only one who had been so stupid, so gullible, so blind to what was happening. And now I realized that I wasn't alone, that there were so many of us, that this wasn't about our intelligence or our stupidity. It was about his predatory nature." Some of the women were able to recover financially. The court ordered Marcus Thompson to pay restitution to all of his victims, though we all knew that the likelihood of him actually paying was extremely small. But at least it was on record. At least there was an acknowledgement of what he owed to each woman. Some of the women were never able to fully recover. Some of them remained traumatized by what had happened to them. Some of them never trusted another person again. Some of them isolated themselves from the world. But all of them knew that the man who had hurt them was now in prison, that he could not hurt anyone else, that there was justice, imperfect though it may be. I went back to being Patricia Hayes, clinical psychologist. I didn't go back to Catherine Monroe. That identity had served its purpose, and then I let it go. But I was changed by the experience. I had stepped outside of myself. I had become someone I had never been before. I had discovered that I was capable of things I had never imagined.
I learned that a mother's love is a powerful force, that I was willing to put myself in danger, to step outside of my comfort zone, to transform myself completely in order to protect my daughter and other women like her. I learned that my instinct to protect my family was stronger than my fear of danger. I learned that I should have trusted my instincts about David Chen from the beginning. I should have pushed harder. I should have been more insistent about my concerns, because my instincts were right. I should have listened to myself instead of allowing myself to be talked out of my concerns by people I loved who wanted to see the best in others. I also learned that it's easy to judge yourself harshly when things go wrong. It's easy to blame yourself for not seeing the signs earlier, for not trusting your instincts more firmly, for not being more protective. But the reality is that predators are very good at hiding who they are. And being a good person, being a trusting person, being someone who wants to see the best in others, that's not a flaw. It's just something that predators exploit. If you're listening to this and you're a woman, I want to tell you something. Be careful about who you trust with your heart and your money. I'm not saying that you shouldn't trust anyone. I'm not saying that you shouldn't fall in love, but I am saying that you should move slowly. I'm saying that you should ask questions. I'm saying that you should trust people who have proven themselves trustworthy over time, not people who seem perfect immediately. Pay attention to the way someone treats you when you're not giving them something. Pay attention to the way they respond when they can't get what they want. Pay attention to whether their interest seems genuine or performative. Notice if someone is interested in your financial situation in ways that feel strange or unusual. Notice if someone is moving very quickly, proposing after a short time, suggesting marriage quickly, asking for money quickly. Notice if someone is trying to isolate you from your family or your friends. And if something feels wrong, if your instincts are telling you that something is off, listen to that voice. Don't dismiss it. Don't convince yourself that you're being paranoid, because sometimes that voice is there to protect you. If you're listening to this and you're a parent, I want to tell you something as well. Your children are going to make choices that you don't agree with. They're going to fall in love with people you're not sure about. They're going to move in directions that you can't control. And sometimes your instincts about people will be right. Sometimes you will see things that your children cannot see because they are too close to the situation, too emotionally invested. When that happens, speak up, not in a way that is controlling or judgmental, but in a way that is honest and clear. Share your concerns, ask questions, pay attention, but also respect your children's autonomy. Respect their right to make their own choices, even if you disagree with those choices, because they are their own people, living their own lives. And if something does go wrong, be there for them, support them, help them heal. Don't judge them. Don't make them feel like their pain is their fault. Be the person who stands beside them when everything falls apart. That's what I did for Simone, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. If you've been victimized by someone like Marcus Thompson, I want you to know that it's not your fault. You're not stupid, you're not weak, you're not undeserving of love. A predator recognized your capacity for love and exploited it. You trusted the wrong person. That doesn't make you a bad judge of character, it makes you human. Go to the police, get help, connect with other victims. Understand that you are not alone in this experience. Understand that your pain is valid and that you deserve support as you heal. And then, when you're ready, begin to rebuild, not just your finances, though that's important, but your sense of trust in yourself, your sense of safety in the world, your ability to believe that love is real and that there are good people out there who will treat you with the respect and kindness that you deserve. Because there are, and you deserve to find them. My name is Patricia Hayes. I'm 57 years old. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a mother. I'm a woman who became an undercover detective to catch a serial fraud artist. And I did it not because I'm a hero, but because I'm a mother who was willing to do whatever it took to protect her family. Marcus Thompson is in prison. He is serving a 30-year sentence for his crimes. He will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars, unable to hurt anyone else. The women he victimized are slowly healing. Some of them have become friends. Some of them have become advocates in their own right. Some of them have used their experience to help other victims. And Simone, my daughter, has built a good life for herself, a life that is her own, a life that is defined not by the man who tried to destroy it, but by her own strength and resilience. I learned something through this experience that I want to share with you. I learned that sometimes you have to become like the predator to catch the predator.
You have to think like they think. You have to understand their psychology. You have to use their own weapons against them. But I also learned that there is always hope, that even in the darkest situations, there is a possibility for justice, that love, real, fierce, protective love, is more powerful than any con or any manipulation. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Tell me if you have a story about fraud or predatory behavior or family betrayal. Tell me how you survived something terrible. Because these stories matter. They deserve to be heard. They deserve to help other people understand the world they're living in. Subscribe to this channel for more stories like this, because there are more stories. There are always more stories, and they all need to be told. This is Dr. Patricia Hayes, signing off. I'm the woman who became a hunter to catch a predator. I'm the woman who put on a new face and a new life to bring a con artist to justice. And I'm telling you that if something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Because your instincts might be all that stands between you and disaster. Stay safe, stay vigilant, stay smart, and never ever let anyone tell you that you're being paranoid for protecting yourself and the people you love. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing that justice is possible even when the system makes it difficult. Thank you for understanding that sometimes a mother's love is the most powerful force in the world. I'm Patricia Hayes, and this is my truth.